They are two outsiders who married princes, became favourites of Queen Elizabeth, and are key to the future of the British royal family.
On April 1st, 2026, the BBC's breaking news ticker stopped the world. And no, it wasn't a joke. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh.
It's not true really, but it's quite fun watching people's reactions.
So if you're in a crowd, you need to be aware that you're all watching to see what the reaction is.
The people in the cars behind have a great time.
Long dismissed as the quiet, steady royal who never made waves, had just spoken, plainly, without apology. And her words collapsed 7 years of carefully maintained royal silence. I have never encountered anyone in the royal family who behaved as improperly as Meghan Markle. Within minutes, the palace issued a rare pointed clarification. Sophie's views reflect the long-standing standards of conduct required to protect the institution's integrity. It was as close as the palace had ever come to publicly endorsing the claim that Meghan's behavior had crossed an irreversible line. What exactly did Sophie reveal? Was this coordinated from the top, or one woman finally reaching her limit? This is the story the royal family has held back for years. Today, it comes out. The woman who came to position not belong. Before we get to the bombshells, let's set the scene. By the time Sophie sat down for that BBC broadcast, she had been a member of the royal family for nearly 3 decades. She married Prince Edward in 1999. She weathered tabloid storms, public missteps, and the brutal internal politics of one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. She came out the other side, not broken, but steeled, respected, trusted, and above all, loyal to the crown in a way that had earned her the quiet confidence of King Charles himself. But what makes Sophie's position uniquely credible is something often overlooked. She came from outside too. She wasn't born into royalty. She married into it, navigated its demands, and chose, day after day, year after year, to let the institution shape her rather than the other way around. When she speaks about the expectations placed on those who enter this family, she isn't reciting a rule book. She is describing a life she has actually lived. So when Sophie speaks, the palace listens. And when the palace lets Sophie speak publicly, it means the silence has become intolerable. And this particular silence had been building since late 2017. Sophie's testimony on April 1st didn't begin with anger. It began with an observation, one she says she shared with her husband Edward almost immediately after Meghan arrived on the scene. "Something is not right here," Sophie recalled telling him. "She is trying too hard, not to belong, but to position herself. She wasn't looking at the role she was given, she was looking at the throne next to her." Read that again. The throne next to her. Sophie was not talking about delusion or naivety. She was describing something far more calculated. A woman who had arrived inside the most storied institution on earth and immediately begun assessing it not as a duty to fulfill, but as a stage to commandeer. Think about that for a moment. Meghan Markle did not marry into the royal family to be the Duchess of Sussex. According to Sophie, Sussex was always a consolation prize. It was the seat she was given. What she wanted, what she apparently believed was within reach, was a role adjacent to the future king, a position that would put her not in the supporting cast, but at the very center of the story. And to get there, she would have to do something far more calculated than simply charming the press. She would have to rewrite the internal hierarchy of the Wales household from the inside. Because here's what the public never quite grasped during those early years of the so-called Fab Four. While the press was busy celebrating the image of two royal couples united in purpose, behind those palace doors, there was no quartet. There was a chain of command built on centuries of protocol, and a woman who had decided that chain didn't apply to her. And ask yourself this: how many people in history have walked into an institution that has outlasted empires, revolutions, and 2 world wars, and genuinely believed they could bend it to their personal will within 18 months? That tells you everything you need to know about the scale of the miscalculation. Sophie described Meghan's arrival as bringing what she called a Hollywood-style ambition that didn't just clash with royal protocol, it sought to devour it. In Los Angeles, you succeed by breaking the internet, by building your brand louder and faster than everyone else in the room. But in London, in the House of Windsor, success is measured by something completely different. It is measured by your willingness to erase yourself so the institution can endure. Generations of royals before Meghan had arrived from outside, absorbed that truth, and built extraordinary lives of service inside it. Sophie was one of them. Catherine was another. But Meghan, it seems, was not willing to make that exchange. She wanted us to change for her, Sophie explained, rather than learning the grace of the institution. And that refusal to be shaped by the crown? It would cost her everything. The William obsession, and the pattern no one wanted to name. Now here is where Sophie's testimony moves from uncomfortable to explosive. Because it's one thing to say Meghan had ambition. It's another thing entirely to say that ambition had a specific target. And according to Sophie, it did. His name was William. Before we go further, let's be precise about what Sophie did and didn't say. She did not make any claim of a romantic affair. She did not allege that Meghan and William were secretly involved. What she described was something more insidious, a calculated pattern of physical and social behavior designed to manufacture proximity, to create a visual narrative of closeness with the future king. A slow, deliberate campaign to insert herself into his orbit in ways that blurred every line the institution had drawn. And that strategy began almost from the moment Meghan entered the picture. Sophie told the interviewer that as early as the Sandringham Christmas of 2017, before the royal wedding, before Meghan was officially anything, palace staff began documenting what she called anomalies in Meghan's physical conduct around William. While the world was charmed by her warmth and American informality, security and protocol teams were watching something else entirely. A woman who consistently violated the physical codes that everyone inside that institution understands, whether written down or not. The incidents Sophie catalogued were not minor. They formed a pattern. There was the May 2018 garden party. Just 72 hours after her wedding to Harry, Meghan reportedly greeted William not with a formal nod or the customary acknowledgement between in-laws, but with what Sophie described as a lingering cheek kiss and a firm, prolonged grip on his forearm. Sources present noted that William visibly stiffened. Senior staff were alarmed. This was not the warmth of a new family member finding her footing. This was a woman who had been a duchess for 3 days and was already testing the boundaries of the man who would one day be king. Then there was the October 2018 mental health engagement at Buckingham Palace. Cameras caught Meghan placing her hand flat against William's back, a gesture of guidance, of ownership, typically reserved for a spouse or a parent. William shifted his position immediately. Sophie described it as a silent rejection of a boundary breach that should never have happened in the first place. And there was the 2019 polo match. Behind the scenes, Sophie described Meghan repeatedly angling herself into William's personal space, bypassing Harry to address the future king directly. Not as a sister-in-law seeking connection, but with what Sophie called theatrical intimacy, designed to be seen, designed to suggest a closeness that was entirely fabricated. It wasn't just about a hug, Sophie clarified. It was about what that hug signaled. It was an attempt to broadcast a level of intimacy that did not exist, and more importantly, a level of intimacy that William did not want. And here is the part that sends a chill down your spine. Sophie says she doesn't believe this was accidental. She doesn't believe it was a cultural misunderstanding. The famous American informality defense that Meghan's defenders have leaned on for years. Sophie believes this was a weapon, a deliberate, sustained attempt to disrupt the Wales household by inserting herself into a visual and social proximity with its future king. There were moments, Sophie admitted quietly, where it felt like she wasn't looking for Harry's approval. She was looking for William's attention. She didn't seem to want the Sussex title as much as she wanted to be the other woman in the Wales narrative, the one who could break through William's reserve. Let that sink in. And if you think the palace was overreacting, if you think this is all retrospective spin, consider what happened at the Royal Foundation Forum in January 2019. The public saw 4 royals on a stage discussing mental health, a moment of unity, of purpose, of the Fab Four in action. What Sophie described happening backstage was something else entirely. According to the Duchess, Meghan reportedly refused to follow the pre-agreed seating arrangements that had been briefed and confirmed in advance. She insisted on a position that placed her directly next to William, rather than following the traditional couple pairing. She then allegedly bypassed briefing notes and spoke over Catherine during the event itself, ensuring her voice was the dominant media takeaway. The tension after the event was severe enough that Catherine was left in tears. It wasn't just a disagreement about a speech, Sophie said. It was a declaration of war on the hierarchy. Meghan believed that her celebrity status gave her an equal seat at the table with the future king and queen. She refused to accept that in this family, duty is dictated by birth and service, not by Instagram followers. The internal file, what the palace actually recorded. For the first time in the history of this ongoing royal drama, a senior member of the family confirmed the existence of the internal HR review launched in March 2021. You may remember the public headlines: bullying allegations, staff complaints, an investigation that the palace quietly acknowledged before Meghan and Harry's Oprah interview drowned out the story. But what Sophie revealed is that the internal file went far deeper than bullying. It was a detailed log, a running dossier of etiquette violations, boundary transgressions, and documented behavioral patterns compiled over years. According to Sophie, the documented behavior included sending late-night informal texts to senior royals and bypassing official channels to exert personal influence. It included repeatedly ignoring the personal space of the then-Queen and Prince Charles, forcing what Sophie described as performative embrace-based interactions that made those around her profoundly uncomfortable. But most significantly, it included using private family conversations as fuel for American media figures, feeding a narrative of the warm, open American outsider being suffocated by a cold, archaic British family. She wasn't trying to belong to the family, Sophie recalled. She was trying to position herself as the disruptor-in-chief. She wanted to be the star. And if she couldn't be the queen, she would be the one who made the queen's life impossible. That final line may be the most revealing of everything Sophie said on April 1st, because it tells you something crucial about the Sussex exit that the public narrative never quite captured. This wasn't a couple driven out by racism and cruelty, pushed to the breaking point by a cold institution. This was, at least from Sophie's perspective, a strategic withdrawal by a woman who realized that her campaign to reorder the royal hierarchy had failed. William was an immovable object. The institution would not bend, so the only remaining move was to burn it down on the way out. The Oprah interview wasn't a cry for help. According to Sophie, it was a commercial launch. The Oprah interview was a final break with discretion and a calculated ambush, Sophie said flatly. She confirmed that she had personally reached out to Meghan more than once, offering mentorship, offering a hand from one outsider-turned-royal to another. Sophie had walked this road herself. She knew what it was like to arrive in an institution that did not bend, to feel the weight of protocols that seemed designed to diminish rather than protect. She wanted to offer that understanding. Meghan declined every time. Her response, as Sophie recalled it, was chilling in its simplicity. "I have Harry. That's all I need." Sophie's interpretation of those words cuts to the bone. Meghan didn't want a mentor. She wanted a monopoly on Harry's loyalty. She needed him isolated, cut off from his family, dependent entirely on her version of reality, so that when the moment came to weaponize his pain for public consumption, there would be no one left who could talk him back from the edge. Isolating the Spare: How Harry Was Locked Inside. If you've ever wondered how a man raised inside one of the most emotionally complex and tightly bonded sibling relationships in modern history ended up estranged from his brother for years, Sophie's testimony offers the clearest picture yet. And it is not a comfortable one to sit with. Between 2019 and early 2020, Sophie describes a slow, methodical severing of Harry's connections to his old world. His direct lines of communication to William's office were quietly closed off. Requests for informal meetings between the brothers were increasingly met with a variation of the same response. Meghan says we're busy. Meghan feels we need space. It was a psychological blockade, Sophie explained. She positioned herself as the only person who truly understood him, while casting the rest of us, people who had loved him for 30 years, as the villains of his story. She wanted him to believe that the world was against them, so that he would have no choice but to follow her lead. Sophie also addressed Harry's specific vulnerabilities with a care that made clear she still feels something for the man, even now. She acknowledged the loss of his mother, the underlying trauma of his childhood, the particular burden of being the spare in an institution that only truly needs the heir. These were real wounds. Anyone who has followed Harry's journey understands that. But Sophie's testimony suggests that rather than helping him process those wounds, Meghan used them as instruments of leverage, deepening his sense of grievance, sharpening his estrangement, ensuring that the family he had grown up inside would come to feel like a threat rather than a refuge. And that is the part of this story that doesn't sit easily. Not the titles, not the Netflix deal. The simple human cost of a man being slowly turned against the people who loved him longest. The christening of Archie in July 2019 served, in Sophie's telling, as a test of power. Not just a new mother's desire for privacy, but a deliberate assertion of control. Meghan reportedly vetoed proposed photographers, refused to publicly name Archie's godparents, and shielded the entire event from the transparency protocols that had governed royal births for generations. It wasn't just about privacy, Sophie insisted. It was a signal to the Queen that the rules of the crown stopped at Meghan's front door. And when the palace, bound by centuries of constitutional law, declined to grant the Sussex household the same security budget and global platform as the future king and queen, the narrative of victimhood was born. Every refusal became evidence of racism. Every protocol became a weapon of oppression. Every boundary became proof of the institution's cruelty. She took a family disagreement and rebranded it as a human rights violation, Sophie noted with a weary shake of her head. The titles, the children, and the questions that won't go away. By 2026, the Sussex saga had entered its most legally and constitutionally complex phase, and Sophie's April 1st broadcast did not shy away from it. The status of Archie and Lilibet's royal titles had been the subject of palace debate since the death of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022. The Sussexes began using the titles Prince and Princess publicly in early 2023. But Sophie revealed that behind closed doors, the palace's recognition was never automatic, and the hesitation had nothing to do with the children's heritage. It's about what those titles represent, Sophie stated. They are markers of lineage, trust, and transparency. You cannot spend 5 years trying to dismantle the crown and then expect the crown to bend its rules to provide you with a branding tool for your children. She then made a statement that sent legal analysts scrambling for their notebooks. When the subject of the persistent public questions around the Sussex children's documentation came up, rumors that have circulated in tabloid circles for years, Sophie did not wave them away. She chose her words with extraordinary precision. The Crown never demanded a DNA test, she said carefully. But yes, when the public and the institution ask why the titles weren't immediately proclaimed, the answer is discretion. In this family, we need to be sure, not just of biology, but of intention. By linking Meghan's insistence on total birth privacy directly to the palace's hesitation over titles, Sophie effectively placed responsibility for the cloud of suspicion squarely on Meghan's own choices. The privacy that was framed as a mother's right became, in Sophie's framing, a constitutional failure. And then there was Harry. His ongoing legal battles with the Home Office over armed police protection, his demand to pay for private access to publicly funded officers, drew some of Sophie's sharpest words. To demand armed state protection while disavowing the duties that justify it is not just tone-deaf, she said. It's dangerous. Harry wants the shield of the monarchy without the sword of its responsibilities. The comparison to Prince Andrew was deliberate and pointed. If you are not a working royal, you do not receive the state's protection. There are no exceptions for special members of the family. King Charles, according to Sophie, had significantly hardened his position by late 2024, particularly after internal polling showed Meghan's favorability in the UK had plummeted to a staggering 17%. The private directive from the king was unambiguous. There would be no second Sandringham summit, no path back to working royal status. The door wasn't locked. It had, in Sophie's words, been built over. Catherine, the woman who stayed. No analysis of Meghan's fall is complete without understanding the woman who never fell at all. Sophie's portrait of Catherine, Princess of Wales, forms the moral spine of her entire April 1st testimony. If Meghan was the storm, Catherine was the stillness. And what makes the contrast so devastating is that it was never a competition, because Catherine never treated it as one. Catherine never tried to outshine anyone. She never sought equal billing. She never demanded that the institution change its pace to match her ambition. She simply showed up, every day, and did the work. While Meghan was calibrating photo angles and negotiating streaming deals, Catherine was sitting on classroom floors with 3-year-olds, learning about early brain development, building a policy framework on childhood that will shape British public life for a generation. Catherine understood from day one that the crown is a marathon, not a sprint, Sophie explained, her voice softening noticeably when discussing the Princess of Wales. She understood that the light doesn't come from the person, it reflects off the crown. The numbers Sophie cited for December 2025 are extraordinary in their disparity. Catherine's favorability among the British public, 73%, William's, 69%. Meghan's, 17%. 3 members of the same extended family, living in the same era, navigating the same institution. 3 completely different outcomes. The numbers don't lie. The Together at Christmas concert, which Meghan's team in California reportedly maneuvered aggressively to compete with, scheduling their Netflix holiday special in the exact same time slot, told the definitive story. Catherine drew 8.4 million viewers. Meghan's special didn't crack the UK's top 10. It was the same playbook we've seen for years, Sophie remarked. The Oprah interview during Prince Philip's illness, the Netflix trailer during Earthshot, and now trying to compete with a Christmas Carol service. It shows a fundamental lack of grace. You cannot bottle the royal glow and sell it as merch while simultaneously trying to tear down the people who actually do the work. The public, it turned out, could tell the difference. Catherine's work on early childhood development, her mental health advocacy, her Shaping Uses campaign, none of it was performance. None of it needed a Netflix camera or a streaming deal to give it meaning. It simply was. And the British people, who have a finely calibrated radar for authenticity, built over centuries of watching royals, knew it. They chose the woman who wipes her own eyes in private and serves in public, Sophie said quietly, over the woman who wipes her eyes for a Netflix camera. The verdict of history. As the April 1st broadcast moved into its closing hour, Sophie turned toward the future. She spoke of a monarchy that had emerged from the Sussex storm leaner, sharper, and more self-aware. The drama, the titles, the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the legal battles, the tabloid warfare had been painful. But it had also served, in Sophie's framing, as a clarifying force. It had stripped away the decorative and forced the institution to recommit to its essential purpose. "We've had our era of correction," Sophie said firmly. "We know who we are. We are the stewards of the British people's history. We aren't here to be liked on social media. We are here to be trusted in times of crisis." By late 2025, with Spotify and Netflix having reportedly scaled back their Sussex deals and the Archewell Foundation seeing a 40% drop in donations, the Sussex brand had reached its wall. The commercial operation built on the wreckage of the House of Windsor had turned out to require the very thing it had rejected: the credibility of the crown itself. You cannot sell royal adjacency to an American audience while simultaneously telling that audience the royal family is a racist, cold, and dysfunctional institution. The contradiction eventually collapses under its own weight. You cannot leave a family, call it toxic, and then try to sell a royal glow lifestyle brand, Sophie observed. The world sees hypocrisy. Sophie also addressed the palace's decision to remain silent through the sustained barrage of Spare, the Netflix documentary series, and the Royal Globe trademark filings. She revealed that this wasn't weakness. It was sovereign finality. The King and William had made a calculated decision. To engage with a performative adversary is to give them the oxygen they crave. By simply moving on, by focusing on the Together at Christmas concert, the state duties of 2025, the lean and focused monarchy now taking shape under William and Catherine's lead, the palace had effectively evaporated the Sussex narrative without firing a single shot. And then the Duchess of Edinburgh delivered her final verdict on the woman who had, for 7 years, stood at the center of the most consequential royal crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII. "She treated us like a stage," Sophie's voice lingered. "We treated her like a family member until she proved she wasn't one." Not shouted, not bitter, just final. The way only the truth can be. The wild element, as Sophie had called Meghan from the beginning, that refusal to be tamed by the requirements of service, had not broken the institution. It had tested it, stress-tested it, exposed every crack, every quiet tension, every unspoken grievance that had been accumulating inside palace walls for years. And when the dust settled, when the Netflix cameras packed up, and the Oprah interview faded into the archive of history, what remained was exactly what had always been there: the crown, the duty, the people who chose it. The door is closed, the kingdom endures, and history, which has a long memory for those who mistake its stage for their own, will do the rest. And now, finally, we know exactly what happened behind it. So here's what I need you to do right now. If you believe the British monarchy just survived its most dangerous internal challenge in modern history, drop a comment below. If you think there's more still to come, that this is only the beginning of the Sussex reckoning, let me know that too. Because this story is not over, and neither are the questions. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single update. Like this video if Sophie's testimony changed how you see this entire chapter of royal history. And share it, because the people in your life who followed this story deserve to hear the full picture. I'll see you in the next one.